Okay, so the next idea is a unit tax. A unit tax is a specific tax per unit. It's a specific addition to the cost of production of a firm. So now let's imagine we're talking about bread. I was talking about bananas before, let's talk about bread. Let's say if the price of bread is £1, then 10 loaves will be produced. If the price of bread is £1, then 10 loaves will be produced. If it's £2, then 20 loaves will be produced. If it's £3, then 30 loaves will be produced. Now let's imagine that for some reason the government decides they want to add £1 to the cost of production of bread. Well, what would that mean? That meant that each producer now faces a higher cost. So the person who could produce it for 1 penny is now producing it for £1 and 1 penny. But let's just take these points here. That 10th producer now has, who couldn't produce at 99p, but he could produce at £1. He now has to produce at £2. The producer who could only produce when it went from £1.99 up to £2, well, now his total costs are at £3. And the person who could produce at that much, at the 30th producer who could have produced a loaf of bread at £3, well, now their cost is £4. And remember, each next unit costs a little bit more. Well, each one is going to be exactly £1 higher than it was. So we end up with a supply curve that's exactly that much higher, and we label it S plus tax. And the idea is, normally we talk about, in my previous video, in the eager video about supply and demand, I talked about how we normally shift demand to the left or to the right, but on this one occasion I want you to think of it shifting upwards. Don't draw the arrow upwards, but just think that the vertical distance between this at any point is exactly £1. Yeah, the producer who could produce at £1 now has to produce at £2. Okay, so you should be clear that for a unit tax, the supply curve shifts to the left, but to the point that the vertical distance between the points is equal to the additional cost per unit, to the tax per unit.